Okay, this video was going to be about random issues. And I guess I'll just go right into it because this is just some of the things that I've thought of, from looking at an interview that Nick Cannon had on the Breakfast Club. I believe that's where he had the interview. It was on the Breakfast Club, and he had mentioned that he didn't like Planned Parenthood, but I'm sure there was probably more content of what he had talked about within his interview, and I think I read it briefly, and I didn't really delve into the issue until I started thinking about it, and I said to myself, I understand where he's coming from, and I can agree with, him not liking the founder and her whole issue of trying to stop, the procreation of black babies. And I'm just gonna go into this article. This was an article I found on PolitiFact, New Hampshire, and I'm gonna read this quote from Ben Carson. This is a quote from Ben Carson on Wednesday, September 30th, 2015, in a campaign to stop Exeter, New Hampshire. Birth control pioneer Margaret Sanger believed that people like me should be eliminated. Did Margaret Sanger believe African Americans should be eliminated? By Clay Wirestone, October 5th, 2015. Despite being dead for 49 years, Margaret Sanger, founder of the organization that became known as Planned Parenthood, has a way of turning up in the news. Her latest appearance came during remarks by Republican presidential candidate Ben Carson at a retirement center in Exeter, New Hampshire. Answering a question at the River Woods retirement community, Carson said that Planned Parenthood, as you know, was founded by Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger was an eugenist. She believed that people like me should be eliminated or kept under control. At a press conference later, he specified what he meant by people like me. So basically, people like me, what he meant was the black race. Claims like this have been examined by PolitiFact before. Back in March, New Hampshire Republican William O'Brien claimed Sanger was an active participant in the KKK. That claim was rated false. And in 2011, businessman and GOP presidential candidate Herman Cain said Planned Parenthood's early mission was to help kill black babies before they came into the world. That statement was rated pants on fire. Carson's statement pulls on the same threads. Sanger was indeed a believer in eugenics, but the basic concept that humanity could be improved by selective breeding was an article of faith for many in the years before World War II. Winston Churchill, Herbert Hoover, Theodore Roosevelt, George Bernard Shaw, H.G. Wells all supported the movement. Also, African American leader W.E.B. Du Bois backed many of its principles as well. Although the eugenics movement included some who had racist ideas, wanting to create a sort of master race, only a minority of eugenicists ever believed this, according to Ruth Ings, professor emerita at Indiana University School of Public Health and an expert in the movement. At the time that Sanger was active, Ings wrote, "The purpose of eugenics was to improve the human race by having people be more healthy through exercise, recreation in parks, marriage to someone free from sexually transmitted diseases, well baby clinics, immunizations, clean food and water, proper nutrition, non-smoking and drinking." It is a far cry to equate eugenics with advocating the elimination of black people. Okay, so I just went over that part of it, and there's more to the article. If you would like to read the article to its entirety, it's in PolitiFacts, New Hampshire, and it says in partnership with Concord Monitor, and the date of it is, I believe it was dated back in 2015. The writer is Clay Wirestone. Okay, so I I believe that's where Nick Cannon got that whole thing. You know, I'll just say this. All black people don't agree with everything that all other black people say. And I remember hearing, every now and then I'll listen to some other videos, and black males, they usually are always the ones doing the talking. And, philosophizing and all that. And I was listening to the Nation of Islam, because sometimes they do have a lot of inspiring words and a lot of interesting input in black culture. And I'm not saying I follow them, but there's a lot of valid points that they bring up, and a lot of truthism in some of the things and the concepts they bring up. But I don't follow that religion. So they mention one key fact. They said all black people are not all your leaders. And I believe that is absolutely correct. Because if you get on these websites and these social media outlets, everybody has something specific, that they want to talk about, and maybe many issues they want to talk about. But I feel like people don't really research what it is that they want to bring out. They just kind of, voice opinions, which there's nothing wrong with that. And, they're hoping that maybe they'll get a following of other people who have the same mindset. And I'm here to tell you that everybody doesn't have the same beliefs. They don't even have the same religions and the same mindset. And I feel that a lot of times what holds black people back is we can't get away from the past. And I'm not saying that the past isn't important. We should know, and we should read about it, and we learn about it, and realize that a lot of what has happened in the past shapes our future. But a lot of the old thinking is still there that has messed a lot of us up. And I think that is what we need to, sometimes we need to kind of get rid of some of that, not all of it. Now, there's a lot of it that is needed, but it drives me crazy. So I put this clip in here. This is Jack Nicholas from The Bird Flies Over the Cuckoo's Nest. So I just thought it was a good little funny thing to put in there, because I said it drives me crazy when people can't get away from some of that old thinking. Now, some of it, like I said, is good, but not all black people who have new ideas, who are young, who are creative and have a different way of thinking and approaching ideas are bad. We tend to, especially there's some older black people who don't like change, and they like to hold on to, religion. That really, even if you tell them, that religion is, that Christianity wasn't created by Africans. It's hard telling some old black woman who she grew up during Jim Crow, and, she may not have never even really focused as much on church, but now that she's getting older, it's all about the religion, and I tend to run into women like that, because I guess I have an old spirit, so I usually attract older people in terms of conversation, because my conversation is a lot mature. And so a lot of times older people are actually enthused by what I know as being the age that I am. Now, I'm not extremely young, but I'm not old either. But for my age, they're surprised or taken back that I know so much. But a lot of that is because I read a lot, and I've learned a lot over, the short span of time. And, I've gone to school, of course, but I think more of it is my own self-knowledge, going out and learning about cultural issues. And these are like leaders from the past. A lot of leaders that influenced black culture in a lot of good ways, positive ways that have brought us to where we are now. And you have to give them what we say, give them their props, and you have to say that it's good that we had people like this. Because if we didn't, we probably wouldn't be as far as we are now. But still, now we have still more ways to go, and you have people, new generation who is built for what is going on right now. What happened in Jim Crow? This is a new Jim Crow. Did you hear that? A new Jim Crow, a new generation, a new era, some of the same old issues, but it's just given a new name and it's approached a whole nother way. So you need to let these people who have a voice and can be just as beneficial in the black community as anyone else, even if they're not religious, even if they don't date the people you want them to date. Come on now. Because it happens, some people say, oh, she doesn't wear her hair like this, and she doesn't date this person, or I don't like her beliefs. I don't like, we get too personal on material items and how a person looks, and, we're kind of hung up on childish stuff, or immaturity sets in. And some of the stuff is crazy. It's like when you look at it and you say, how does judging how a woman wears her hair have anything to do with the advancement of colored people? It doesn't. How does what she wears have anything to do with the advancement of colored people? Just because she's not wearing Louis Vuitton, Gucci, and Versace. Let's get past all of that. So people say they want a black revolution, but sometimes I don't know if that's entirely true, because we still have some of the same old issues that haunt us even today. And okay, so we have a lot of people on YouTube who say there's single parent homes headed by black unwed mothers. But think about it. We don't know all of these people's situation and their background and what has happened to them before all of this. And last I checked, it takes 2 to have babies. And so we don't know what this woman went through. Everybody's situation individually is a case-by-case situation. There's a backstory to all of it. We don't know if she just chose to be a single parent. Maybe she couldn't have babies. She adopted that kid. Did you ever think about that? Well, she shouldn't adopt it by herself. Maybe she chose to be a single mother. Maybe something happened in her life that she chose to be a single mom. Maybe she wasn't wanting to be a single mom. She might have had a husband and he died. Okay? These are things we don't even think about, these type of issues. We just want to judge people and look at everything from a negative fashion. We don't really know the backstory of each person and what they've gone through. Maybe she had a father. Maybe there is a parental relationship going, but she divorced. Maybe she couldn't, maybe she just, she waited late to have kids in life. And she just didn't get married, There's lots of different reasons. So I just don't know why that aren't within the black culture, people tend to judge one another harshly without looking at real facts. And it is not just black women who are single mothers, guys. I've seen white women that have kids and they don't have, a husband, and there's no father in the home. Maybe the father comes around, but they're not together anymore. They have issues too. There are other cultures that deal with some of the same issues that black people deal with. Now, this is a picture of a woman all hunched over, and she doesn't look very happy. Okay, Nick Cannon mentioned something about Planned Parenthood and how he didn't like it, and I'm hearing this chime going around from other black males that they don't want Planned Parenthood. Okay, this woman, you know what she's suffering from? STDs. Women tend to show up, STDs tend to show up really fast. We know when, pretty much like this, we know when something's wrong with us. And I think that has a lot to do with the way our bodies are built, because, we have sensitive bodies to where we know, this doesn't feel right. Something ain't right. So these are some of the issues that are happening all over, not just in America, but let's focus on America. Here, cities, people sleeping unprotected. These are things that you have to look out for. Now, if you say you don't want Planned Parenthood, why are you saying it? You don't want it because the founder was racist and she studied the whole thing of eugenics, and her whole issue was to eliminate black babies. That's what you don't like about where it originated from. But you do like the idea of staying safe, being healthy, all those things outlined. See this baby here? You have babies and you have an STD or STDs. Do you want your baby to come out suffering with a disease before they even can talk? Let's think before we start throwing the bathwater out with the baby. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't make any sense. Anyone who is sexually active can get gonorrhea, and any other disease for that matter of fact. It's not just the black. The disease doesn't say, oh, well, you're black, so you're going to get the disease, but I'm not going to give it to the white people and all the other people. Come on now. The disease is out for everyone. No matter what race and background you are, you can get it. So we need good practices, okay? You may not like, which I don't like the whole idea with Margaret Sanger and what she stood for, of course. But I do like the idea of being healthy, and not getting STDs and not being exposed to STDs. And being able to control, okay, should we have a baby? Can we afford to have a baby? And then, also the issue, HIV and AIDS is still prevalent. People don't talk about it, doesn't mean it isn't out there. So let's think before we really start trying to bash the whole idea of Planned Parenthood. And maybe we can rephrase the name because we don't like who it originated from. Now, Sanger charmed the black community's most distinguished leaders into accepting her plan. So I guess that would be W.E.B. Du Bois is what they're referring to, which was designed to their own detriment. Genetically inferior, okay? Sanger said such a plan, the Negro Project, would reduce the birth rates among the diseased, sickly, and poverty-stricken and antisocial classes, elements unable to provide themselves and the burden of which we are all forced to carry. So I guess, it's pretty much a whole plot to decrease the population of black community. I don't think that worked, even though that was her intention. Now, it could be named something else. Now, I would be for somebody saying, let's name it something other than Planned Parenthood. And let's take that name off of that because that's what this woman coined it as. We do not want word to get out that we want to exterminate the Negro population by Margaret Sanger, founder of Planned Parenthood. Now, since she was the founder of Planned Parenthood, it could be named something else, so that somebody else could put in better ideas, sexual health, something sexual. Maybe it could be called sexual health and wellness for adults. And maybe there's other names that could be called, and we could get the Planned Parenthood thing off of it. And then I think too there's the whole issue behind abortion and the control of women's bodies and just the control issue. I think too some males feel that they want that because they want to control women. There's some guys that want to control women, but guys, you want women to have a lot of babies, you better think, are you working? Are you going to stay there with that mom? Are you just going to complain about a bunch of women with babies and there's no man in the home? Because if you're making these women pregnant and you're not going to stay with them, think about it, okay? So now that I bring up that issue, how much does it cost to raise babies? Baby supplies, the cost of the year, feeding, diapering, clothing, nursery, bathing, baby gear. Wow, that's a lot of money. So if you're not a top dog and a high roller and making all this money and rolling in the dough, then you don't need to be talking about making babies. Especially if you can't take care of yourself. So babies is a serious deal. So if you're going to make babies, then you better be able to help her take care of them babies. So if you're running around talking about you don't want Planned Parenthood and you don't want women getting abortions, then if you're the one making these babies, you better stick with her. And don't complain about, oh, it's her fault and that's why I left. And let's backtrack now. You said you didn't want Planned Parenthood. So if you don't want her having babies, because some men don't want it where the woman is having babies. They don't want the babies. They just want to be with the woman and they want to have an experience with her, but they don't want to make no babies. But the babies come. She wants to have the baby because she's from a religion that says if you have a baby, you can't kill this baby. You can't abort this baby. We got to have this baby. But if you didn't want to have the baby to begin with, you have no business having sex with her unprotected. So therefore, you need a plan, right? You need some plan of action so that you can keep her from getting pregnant, even though you're in a relationship and you're sexually active. And you need to protect yourself. She needs to protect herself. Okay, so let's say she's going to have these babies. How much does it cost for her OB appointments, her lab work, ultrasound? Okay, how much does it cost for the lab ultrasound, the anatomy, labor and delivery, OBGYN visits? Look at that cost. Okay, for you people who are always complaining about welfare dependency, some of these women end up on welfare because if that man is not making enough money or he leaves her stuck with the babies, she's still having the baby. She's carrying the baby. She has to go to these appointments. Prenatal care, childbirth, maternity, leave. She's probably working part-time or maybe she can't work, depending on her circumstance. Baby gear, bottles, blankets. What else? Diapers, formula, food, clothes. Okay. Child care, life and disability insurance, college savings. Whoa. We haven't even, what? Have we scratched the surface yet? So having a child is serious business here, fellas. So maybe that is the reason why some of these women stop having all these babies, because if you're not going to be serious and stick by her side and be a real man and be a father to these kids, she's, what do you expect her to do if she's going to be by herself having to deal with all of this? So look, here again you have OBG appointments, ultrasound. So I'm just saying, these people that say these things, they're not thinking before they speak. They just spout off a bunch of bull crap. And like the guy was saying in this meeting, he was like, all black people who are saying all this stuff are not your leaders, and they really aren't. They just kind of want the likes, they want the popularity and all that, and they want the high fives because, we tend to jump on the bandwagon. When somebody says something we think it's for us, it could be just as divisive as somebody on the outside. We're setting yourself up for failure. So use common sense is what I'm saying. So although I'm going to be honest, I don't like the whole founder issue. I don't like what she stood for, no. Whether she was with the KKK or not. I don't like the idea of her plot, to eliminate the black race or to, and then there's that whole issue with Roe versus Wade, so we already know about that, and Pence. So it's, and then the Negro Project, all that stuff, and then Sanger's correspondence shows that this sentence advocates for black doctors and ministers to play leadership roles in the Negro Project to avoid misunderstandings. Lynching Jim Crow laws gave blacks good reason to be wary of attempts to limit the number of children they bore. In Harlem, she hired a black doctor and social workers to quell those fears. So sometimes black people can be divisive towards one another, and I understand where that whole anger comes in at as black people, black culture. You know, you have these black, what I've heard the term coons, I've heard the term Uncle Tom or Sambo. Black people who they're black, but they on the inside they're just as divisive as some KKK member. They do the work of the KKK, you know, to get that pat on the back. They're like the slave master's minion. They go out and they do just as much damage as the white slave master himself. So I understand where people are coming from with that anger. I don't agree with that either. I don't think that we should, you know, follow these crazy people. But let's be honest here. We need to think of how can we change that whole thing. Maybe it could be the woman's wellness or wellness, sexual health and wellness, instead of Planned Parenthood, coined after Margaret Sanger. So I'm just saying, as a way of thinking, you know, think before we act on certain issues, because it could be just as detrimental. And you know, AIDS is still out there, HIV is still out there, all these diseases are still floating around. So, you know, we say Black Lives Matter. Think about it. That matters too, your health. That's just as important. And making good choices before you act. Think before you act. Before you speak, think about what you're speaking and research and go through it and say, you know, I could pull this out and change this about it. I don't like that whole slogan, Planned Parenthood. It's because of who it comes from. I understand where you're coming from, but let's think before we do things. Use common sense as black people.